initial. I'm not sure if one can see this. We'll make it a little bigger. I sent it out earlier. We just sort of want to go through who we are. Mr. Schulte is not online, so we might not do the recreational safety update. And Risa is not online either, so I'm not sure where Risa is. Seth is on here, and he's going to talk a little bit about the fishing, hunting, and paddle sport education, but really focus in on a recent COVID and tourism and outdoor recreation review, but also talk a little bit about the conservation funds. Bennett Knox, who is with Metro Parks, first time joining our crew, is going to be talking about a fascinating center that I'm a big supporter of, the Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center. And this came about from our past discussion with enhancing access to underserved communities. And Harry Stone made a big push that we should really think through this, and I think this is a classic case for it. Craig is going to be joining us. He just joined us there and give us an update on sort of the upcoming congressional meeting and anything else ORBA. And then we just want to briefly talk about the federal legislation that could impact Ohio River recreation. And one of them that we want to focus in on a little bit, and he's going to be speaking next month to us, but is the Whales Conservancy. And they have a significant initiative going right up, and I sent a YouTube video of our previous meeting. And then just briefly touch base with the Outdoor Alliance and the American Rivers. And I'm looking to see if someone knows David Schmidt in Crittenden, Kentucky, who is on the American Rivers Board of Directors.
I sent you a note. I'm on his board. I helped to hire him, so I can give you all you need to know about David.
Brewster comes through again. And then we want to end up with any working group committee reports, and so, or any concerns or anything else. And so just briefly with the recreational safety, oh, well, here, roll call and introductions. I'm just going to start off and call off people. Mr. Rudder, I say your favorite place to recreate in the Ohio River Basin. Who are you, Mr. Rudder, and where do you play?
I'm David Rudder, and I'm with Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments. And my favorite place to play in the Ohio River Basin is anywhere I can get my kayak in.
All right. Craig, we'll call on you, seeing that you're chewing.
Yep, sorry about that. Late lunch. So I'm Craig Butler. I'm the Executive Director of the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy. My favorite place to recreate is anywhere in the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy.
Craig is also co-chair of ORBA. And Trish.
Hi, Trish Allison from Pittsburgh, co-founder of an educational nonprofit up here. I would say the same thing David said, anywhere I can get my kayak in the water.
We are kayak driven. Mark Young.
Mark Young, Louisville, Kentucky, Parks Forever Consulting. I think my favorite is at Falls of the Ohio in Louisville, Southern Indiana, riding the Ohio Greenway River Trail.
All right, Seth Wheat.
I'm Seth Wheat. I'm with the Kentucky Department of Tourism. The main two hats I wear are for adventure tourism initiatives, and then also I do sports tourism for the department.
And Bridget Taylor.
I'm Bridget Taylor. I'm an environmental scientist with Ursenco. I run the bi-monthly water quality sampling program as well as do GIS. I think Red River Gorge is my favorite place in the Ohio Basin.
Well, I'm David Wicks. We're going to have Bennett introduce himself last. And I'm David Wicks, and my favorite place is, I just went yesterday on Indian Creek right outside of Vevey, and it was just wonderful. We have Brewster down there on the bottom. Brewster?
Yeah, Brewster Road, Cincinnati. And my favorite spot is actually right downtown in Cincinnati with all the bridges there. And it's a great place to surf the boat wake.
All right. And Bennett, who are you?
Bennett Knox. I manage natural areas for Louisville Metro Parks, and I think I need to get out more. I don't have much to say as far as that recently. Sorry.
Did Jack go?
Jack, sorry, Jack.
That's all right, David. Jack Sutton. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Ohio River Recreation Trail, a former park guy, retired from Great Parks of Hamilton County, Ohio. Currently live in Aurora, Indiana, right on the Ohio River. But your project forced me to look at a Google map today. One of my favorite places on the planet is called the Joyce Kilmer Memorial Forest. It's a wilderness area in the Nantahala National Forest in North Carolina. And sure enough, it's in the Ohio River Basin. So it takes a while for me to get there, but it's one of my favorite places on the planet.
I think it sounds like a road trip. Well, is there anything else added to the agenda here? One item that I'd like to add just briefly, and we're going to call Jack Sutton on it to talk a little bit about the Rivertown Review. And we could do that towards the end because we're recruiting people to help with the Rivertown Review. What Jerry was going to talk about was the Coast Guard and their interest in helping us with signage, but also accident reports. They've sent notes and we've gotten information back from Kentucky and I think from Indiana. They're waiting on Ohio. And so they're going to consolidate all of the accident reports on the Ohio River for the past 10 years. And one of the pieces that might come out of it is a possibility of a signage program at each one of the boat ramps that the Corps can help, or the Coast Guard could help design. And they have offered to help identify funding streams for such. So we'll get an update from Jerry later on. David, you were on the phone call with Lisa yesterday or 2 days ago about the GIS and water trail update after the presentation last time.
Yes. And let me, basically what we kind of came up with, conclusions to within that, we three areas, three kind of prongs to focus on with that. And one of those is to use the Ohio River Recreation Trail Guide, build that out along the full main stem of the Ohio River. And then doing the same thing, going after funding to help with the Tennessee River line, with Brad's efforts there, and assisting because they would like to create something that is as detailed and useful as the Ohio River Recreation Trail Digital Guide. But that on the basin-wide scale, what we'd really be looking for is leverage the National River Recreation database on National Rivers Project and expanding that. And so really kind of a focus would be looking at what do we need to fund positions to do all of that. So that was.
Is there going to be a sort of a short proposal, a concept paper developed that looks at the future of supporting the trails and the overall basin work?
Maybe. We're still, so at this point, so that was kind of just coming to that agreement on what it was, what's the focus going to be of that we're seeing for in terms of a digital guide, digital database of water trails and that within the basin. We're looking at the next meeting to actually coming with a scope. So what's the scope of work that would be involved in that, and trying to come up with some budgeting numbers. And that's at the next meeting of the digital guide group. So
then progress. Well, why, thank you very much. Anything else? I noticed, Brad, you just joined. Do you want to introduce yourself, Brad? And is there anything else to add to that discussion?
Yeah, so I'm Brad Collett, Associate Professor at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville and Director of the Tennessee Riverline Partnership. I didn't catch all of what David said, but I'm excited that our GIS group is going to be meeting with David and James from the River Management Society to talk about how we can optimize our own data collection processes that we're kicking off here in very short order with those existing data sets so that they speak well with each other and that we can use it as another building block and a regional resource.
Sounds great. Craig, I know the PAS extension grant from the Corps has a GIS component with that. How does this relate to, how does the Tennessee River Line and the digital guide and the River Management Society page relate to the Army Corps' PAS extension?
Good question. I'm not an expert with that, but I think it also goes to, David, we've also got a working group within Orba too, just around GIS coordination, making sure that we're using at least architecture that can speak to each other and work complementary of each other. And so I think that is one of those areas that Richard Harrison was leading that group with a few others. So I think that's important. But other than that, I think I would have to let Harry chime in on the rest of the connectivity there with the PAS grant. That's just not in my wheelhouse.
Sounds great. Anything else for the good of the order, for advice for David or for Risa or for anybody else in reference to this? Thank you very much. We're moving right along to Seth Wheat, and Seth is sort of beginning to think about sort of comprehensive fishing and paddle sport and hunting education, but has been taken over by COVID in part. And so they've done some recent work on the impact of COVID on tourism and outdoor recreation. So I thought that'd be perfect to share right now.
Yeah, I'll keep this pretty brief and just hit the high points for you all. And I had asked for a copy of a recording that Air Commissioner Michael Manget did with a gentleman named Amir Elon, who is the president of Longwoods International, a research firm. They shared it with all the tourism industry here in Kentucky, and Longwoods has done, I believe, weekly, if not weekly, then certainly monthly, traveler sentiment surveys through the entirety of the pandemic. And I'll be to have the knowledge level that those two have, but I'm going to get a link to that and I'll send it to you, David, or I'll just send it to the group so you all can go back and watch it. The big thing, and I mean, this, I'm not going to tell you all anything you all don't know. I mean, it is in a lot of areas devastated the tourism industry, right? And I think it helps too to think of us not just as tourism, but think about the entirety of the hospitality industry. And the big number is we're down $4.5 million this year from where we were last year. We do all of our marketing, if you all don't know this, through a 1% transient room tax on every hotel room in the state of Kentucky. And so we have an authorization level we can spend from the legislature. So on the good news side of the ledger, this session, they actually voted to increase our spending authority. But of course, that'll likely be a moot point for a while because we're not going to hit the receipts to total the spending authority that we've been given. So we're not alone in that. Every state, I believe has probably got a similar story to tell. But, you don't want to say too much too soon, but I think there's no really better way to describe the current mood than cautiously optimistic. Because as difficult as it has been for the tourism and hospitality industry, I think we stand also to really drive the engine coming back to true economic recovery, right? As people are looking to get outside more, as people are looking to travel more, we've got to be prepared to meet them in the new ways they're going to travel and meet them with the new needs that they're going to have. But that's what that research that Longwoods and folks like them have done. And it's I'm sure no surprise to you all that people are looking for outdoor experiences. They're looking to drive more as opposed to fly. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. And in that vein, Kentucky has always been a drive state. We've always caught people on their way down to the coast. We've always caught people who are within 4 to 6 hours drive of our state to spend a long weekend, generally speaking, of course. But so what has always been not necessarily a handicap, but we've always sort of, we just don't have the number of flights available that some other states do. So where that may have hamstrung us a little bit in the past, that now stands to really benefit us, right? So we've got to make sure, of course, camping, that's where people want to stay. They want to stay in Airbnbs. They want to stay in, single family lodging accommodations. So, or we need to make sure we've got the resources to our partners that operate those kind of facilities so that they're ready, so that their messaging, our partners' messaging, they want us, what we're seeing is that the traveling public wants to see messages that deal with safety still. How are you going to keep me safe when I come to visit? Are you, are masks still important? Or, it doesn't even have to be as on the nose as things like that, but just, are you doing things to make sure people are going to feel comfortable when they travel? So trying to get that message out to our industry partners, the people that actually deal with the traveling public. But I like I said, I think it's this idea of cautious optimism and making sure we stand ready to safely, but also really capitalize on what I think could possibly be a pretty big surge of people looking to travel. So that's the first thing. I'll send you all that recording. It goes into a lot more detail than I can tell you about and feel comfortable with. But the other big topic that David and I talked about on the phone a couple of weeks ago is the idea of, he mentioned in the agenda specifically land and water conservation funds. And again, I'm no expert on that, but I think the larger stroke of federal funding for outdoor-based projects here in Kentucky. And I'm going to start sharing my screen quickly. And I didn't answer the question of what is my favorite place to recreate, but I'm going to show you all here shortly. It's actually at the very end of the Ohio River. It's Ballard County, Kentucky. This first is I don't believe I've ever shown this group. This is our Kentucky Tourism website. This is our industry portal. We have a link here to some specific COVID relief funds that we are helping. This was the governor's decision to dedicate some of the money that Kentucky got from the CARES Act to go to support our restaurants and our bars that have been spend so much time closed. Our Kentucky Tourism Industry Association, which is the statewide association for all of our local CVB partners, our hotel and lodging industry, they've got some drafts of some programs they're working on to help us get the wheels turning again. But to bring it up to the to these federal funds that we use to fund outdoor-based projects here in Kentucky. David and I had a good conversation about this the other day, and I'm not finding it here like I did in the fall when the Great American Outdoors Act was being debated and voted on in Congress, but there was some really good interactive maps. I've actually found it at another site that talks about every land and water conservation project, in any county in the country. You can click on it. I'm sure you all probably know this. You can look at what they've paid for. And it's a wide-ranging list, and there's been a ton of money here in Kentucky. You can see it's over 125 million. They quote some statistics from the Outdoor Industry Association about how important our outdoor economy here is in Kentucky. And so we were very happy, I should say, very happy to see the Great American Outdoors Act passed that will fully and permanently fund land and water conservation and dedicate a portion of money to the extensive backlog we've got, and not just here in Kentucky, all over federal and state properties for maintenance and things like that. If you go to wilderness.org, I found the map I was trying to find on the Land and Water Conservation Coalition page. But here is my favorite place to recreate, Ballard County, Kentucky, in the Ohio River Basin. I'm to a fault, a waterfowl hunter. And we have sort of our flagship waterfowl public hunting areas in this part of the world. So you can look and see where Land and Water Conservation Fund money has been spent in Ballard County. You can see the total number of projects. There's been 10 of them, the dollar amount, and you can actually look at the list here. And we've got Ballard County Recreation Park, La Center City Park, Community Park, County Park, Soccer Field, City Park, County Park, Tennis Court. That's the same for a lot of counties in Kentucky. And I don't mean to come here and say that these kinds of projects aren't important. From the seat I sit in and doing the work that I do, I talk about two main sources of funding. So not only land and water, but the one that I'm much more familiar with is, of course, our recreational trails program. And they're both administered by the Department of Local Government. They're not exactly the same. Different types of projects qualify. The matching requirements are different. The good thing about rec trails is that it's only an 80-20 match. Land and water, if I'm not mistaken, is 50-50. So you've got to be able to come up, the local applicants have to come up with a lot more scratch to be able to even apply for those grants. But the point I'm trying to get at is with these two, especially now that we've I guess nothing is ever a sure thing, but secure this land and water funding. And I've mentioned this I don't know that it's been this group exactly, but I've mentioned this before. Are we spending this money wisely? Are we spending it to the best of our ability to ensure that we're meeting county parks and local parks are great. And some of these places you see them go to things like sidewalks. And yeah, that's part of recreation, but in a lot of instances, it's a stretch to consider some of the things as recreation, in my humble opinion. So are we doing a disservice and not at least looking and being thoughtful about sending some of this money to larger scale, more true outdoor-based recreation projects. And the reverse side of that coin is that one of the things I need to do too is I go out and meet with people all across Kentucky and say, hey, here's where you go, apply for these funds. Here's where you can go and get some assistance. We've got to make sure we're sending in good applicants. They just announced last year's RTP funds just in the last week or two. And not long after they made the announcement, one of our recipients, there were only 12 recipients, one of them's already opted out of it. It's something like $40,000. And that's not a huge chunk of money when we're talking about the things that we're talking about. But the fact of the matter is that's $40,000 that could have gone to another project. It's $40,000 that could have gone to someone who was more prepared to receive it and use it. So we need to make sure on the other end of that spectrum, I think that, we're doing everything we can to get good applications in, to make it as competitive as possible so that we're being, one, good stewards of the money is first and foremost, but then also, like I mentioned, just I think trying to spend this money in such a way that it keeps an eye on larger recreation initiatives that can really then trickle out into some of our more localized projects. But if you build, it's just like building an interstate highway system. You've got that interstate and then you've got U.S. highways and state highways and county roads. You need everything in conjunction to build good networks of trails and to build good, thoroughfares of recreational activity. And then David had posed the question to me, and I'm paraphrasing, and I may be misquoting, but what type of legislation from the federal level or what kind of assistance would be good, or what do I think we need? And it's a tricky spot for me personally, being, a state employee. We don't ever lobby for legislation. We can answer questions if we're asked, but I think, the one thing I would say is that making sure our congressional delegation here in Kentucky and everyone in the basin is aware and educated on these programs, what their intentions are. They have, a desire to see them spent and implemented towards projects that, that I think will provide good return on investment, not just in dollars and cents, but, in the whole quality of life aspect we find ourselves working towards so often. That's the sort of the down and dirty of those two topics. And I'll, if you've got questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. The working group that I had am shepherding has not met in several months, and that's entirely my fault. We got together, I believe it was back in December, Billy Bennett and Trish, and I invited Will Adams, who's our Deputy Commissioner of State Parks, to join us. Not only will State Parks be, I believe, a phenomenal partner in the goal of getting more people interested and educated in hunting, fishing, and paddle sports, but Will has served on the state board for the backcountry hunters and anglers. I think it's a personal passion of his, and he gave me a contact to Miss Olivia Dangler, who works for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. She is, among other things, their R3 coordinator, and R3, as you all know, is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And I'm going to be meeting with her next week to get caught up on everything that they're doing, make sure I understand it, make sure I can maybe bring her into the fold of our working group, or possibly even, our larger recreation force here, because, Paul Wilkes, who was with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, has since moved on. They've got an interim fisheries director there. So I think we could get some more representation from Fish and Wildlife, not at the very least, get her involved with this here group, with our specific working group, because the goals of these two entities just overlap perfectly. Every summer, and I believe it always coincides, I'm not positive, but I believe it always coincides with National Trails Day, there's a free fishing day. So it'd be good, I think, for our working group, and I'm going to start working and getting ideas to help, one, get the word out about that, and maybe have we'll do some additional press, social media accounts, but also maybe do some special events geared around a free fishing day to help introduce people into the wonderful sport of fishing. And that's all I got. Let me stop.
National Trails Day is June 5th.
That sounds right, but I don't have it on the top.
Yes.
Hey, David, could I ask Seth a question? Brewster here.
Sure.
Hey, Seth, great to see you, buddy. Hey, can you send us the contact information and name of the person who took over from Paul? You said he left.
Yes.
Fish and Wildlife.
I will.
Is that correct? Okay, good. Yeah,
I will.
That'd be great.
I'll
Thank
be
you.
happy to do it. And on the note of contacts, I've talked with a lady named Jessica Hill, who is the new coordinator for rec trails and landed water at our Department of Local Government. She's phenomenal. I've asked her to kind of keep me in the loop as things progress, and I'm going to be working with her a lot, I believe, in the coming months. And if nothing else, just trying to get her in front of some of the people I work with. So to get back to that idea of making sure we have good applicants, making sure we have good people coming to these programs who want to spend the money effectively.
Okay, and Craig knows this as well, but Amir used to be the head of travel and tourism for the state of Ohio, and he's
Oh, I didn't know
wonderful.
that.
So I'm really glad you're working very closely with him. That sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Any questions, any thoughts with Seth? I'm fascinated with how funds are spent, and it is a community decision in many ways. But is there any assistance that people who design grants that, if we wanted to focus people on water and water trails and recreational corridors, is there some assistance that we could provide to the entire basin in a process? Is there that's the question you could think about, down the road. What can we recommend? What can we think about because I'm fascinated with that map of where funds are spent. And Risa noticed when she looked at West Virginia, that it was a similar thing, that a good percentage of those funds went to, organized playgrounds versus outdoor recreation.
Well, and it ties into and I know you all have had a lot of folks reviewing the different SCORP documents. It all ties into that too. And there's nothing wrong with theirs, but it's out of date, and it doesn't really, in my opinion, and maybe it's wrong, but it could focus more, I think, on the kinds of things I was just talking about. But,
Any other thoughts?
I think that's, of course, you mentioned the SCORP. So it's a statewide process, of course, for land and water. But I think there's going to be a move for kind of the next generation of land and water conservation fund grants. And now that it's permanently and fully reauthorized, that looking at that 50% match and maybe taking that down to what the recreational trails program, which is an 80-20 match, do that, but also make room for some of these larger landscape scale projects that are maybe more regional based. And I think that's kind of the next lobbying effort, is to change the policy.
for rec trails for several years, I was under the impression that so many of the restrictions we put on the grants here in Kentucky were actually federal restrictions. But come to find out, that may not have been the case. And we had more ability to sort of make those decisions ourselves than I ever realized we had. And that's just something that we've only done. The 80-20 for rec trails has only been the last, I think, 2 or 3 years here in Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken. So, and you're right. I think it's, you strike when the iron's hot, and the fact that it's been permanently and fully funded, and that there was so much good publicity about it. Now's the time, I think, to take a look at it and say, all right, let's continue on this path. It's a good thing. I'm not sitting here, I don't want to harp on it, and I'm not trying to take anybody's tennis courts away. I mean, all these things are important, but where that money comes from, and I believe it's larger intent, I think, down that path that I was talking about.
The recreational trails program does fund water trails as well. Not just
something else I heard wasn't allowed in Kentucky.
Well, they're doing it in other states. So
we have Bennett up here and then Risa.
I remember for so long it was such a restricted pot of money that a tennis court versus a $200,000 $300,000 project, you just couldn't really think of those bigger projects.
Yeah. On
the land and water conservation side.
The other thing that always hung us up on rec trails, and I'm just so much more familiar with it just because it's one I've known about for longer. It's one I've always promoted, like our trail towns that we work with and things like that. But the deed restrictions on the properties, we were always told that properties had to be held in perpetuity to be eligible, and that was a federal requirement. And come to find out, every state's able to set their own requirements, and of course you want to, I fully realize and appreciate the fact that you need to ensure some longevity in these projects, but even let's say a 99 or 100-year lease is a heck of a lot shorter than in perpetuity, and a lot more inviting to a lot of potential, project sites. So yeah, it's very interesting.
We look forward to your future work. And, you know, here's just a challenge that often people think of when they think of education or paddle sport education. It's education of the policymakers as well. And people who make some of these, you know, if they're different in every state, that's just a thought. You know, we can go after that. Well, why, thank you very much. I wanted to introduce a friend of mine, Brewster or Bennett Knox. Bennett and I have gone back a long time. When I worked for the public school system, Bennett was still in Metro Parks. And now I think runs the largest community forest in the United States. And in addition to that, he has taken on all of the natural areas of Metro Parks and oversees them. So a huge job. And one of the things that he got a nice project with Russ Clark, who unfortunately is not here today, where he looked at the Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, Harry Stone has encouraged us to really think about the impact of recreation and the impact of our whole Ohio River plan on underserved communities and on environmental justice. And Bennett presented at the Orba and Ortkrey conference last year on an environmental justice panel. And I think that his work is exemplary personally. And I'd like to see if there's some way that Orba and our group could support their work. So towards that end, I've asked Bennett to give an introduction to what is he doing. Bennett, you're on.
Thank you, David. And a little bit of an embellishment there on as far as my job, but I do work for parks and do manage some of the natural areas in Louisville for Metro Parks. So I'm going to share my screen if I can, David.
You can, you should be able to.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all. And I'll kind of give a high level view of this and hope that maybe we can spark some conversation on how it does seem to fit pretty well with what you all are trying to do as far as a location along the system that you all are working to plan. So David mentioned, I'm starting with this slide because it's our program. So what I'm going to talk about really started as a program that was designed to address inequities and how we were, as a department, were doing environmental education and outdoor recreational programming. So like a lot of cities that have a history of segregation, you know, a lot of this kind of work was happening in the suburbs, and the focus of our department for really the last couple of decades was not about engaging urban youth in outdoor recreation. So that, you know, systemic issue that was reflected, has been reflected in a lot of, you know, the structures that we have in terms of who we're hiring, how we're recruiting. It's just a whole cycle that I know you all are probably aware of, that, you know, the lack of diversity in our environmental field, and whether it be an agency, a nonprofit, or corporate entities. So we're trying to be a part of the solution, at least in Louisville. So we 12 years ago started this program where we were really trying to get kids multiple touches in a year within parks and natural spaces within their neighborhood. Well, and then the fact of the matter was, in West Louisville, we didn't have amenities to be able to do those kinds of programming. So that's what I really wanted to focus on, is it's that effort to try to bring those infrastructure amenities. So I'm really teeing up the conversation about the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and there's actually a subset of Land and Water Conservation Fund called the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program that is focused on engaging urban youth and families in the outdoors and creating those opportunities. So that's a whole other program that's out there that's funded. So anyway, our approach on the program has been to create these kind of, we call them cradle to career access to nature. So over the years, we've built up a program that really offers kids from age 3 all the way to 21 with opportunities. We're trying to create career pathways through the programming where we actually recruit kids who come through the programming to take summer jobs, even take full-time jobs. And ultimately, we're trying to get to the point where we have a regional outdoor learning center in West Louisville called, as David mentioned, the Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center. So here's the map that kind of shows where we're located along the Ohio River. So obviously downtown Louisville right here. We're talking about this wonderful system of parks, which we in the community really don't think of as a connected park system. So we're trying to change that because they are all along the Ohio River. They are connected. There's a multi-use path that goes from downtown all the way through here called the Louisville Loop. And then, just this is all forested all along, except for the golf course. But even along the golf course, there's a nice stretch of woods. So we're trying to think of these parks from Portland Wharf, well, even starting back at Shippingport, which isn't a metro park. It's actually owned by the Corps. As a system of parks that's connected, that offers a lot of different opportunities within them. If you're familiar with the Parklands of Floyd's Fork, kind of similar concept that we want to encourage for West Louisville, where you think of node parks that have a lot of different amenities. And so trying to change the dynamic there and think of them as a connected system. So this is the center, Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center. It's right on the banks of the Ohio. It's a $12 million facility. We propose this to be not a nature center in the sense of, we're not going to have exhibits on the inside. This is really an outreach center that has elements of public use. So we want to store all the canoes, and I'll talk about some of the amenities we're creating, which aren't all related to paddling and the river, but we're developing amenities in this particular park, in hiking trails, a bike trail. There's recently, as part of the project, we've actually constructed a Ohio River boat ramp. So there's canoe and boat access. That's going to be, the ribbon will be cut on that in the spring. That's in partnership with Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. I want to show you another park just down the way, which is called Chickasaw, which is also along the Ohio River. The history here is this was the Black Park. Our park system was segregated for 4 decades. This was the African American Park, which was about a mile away from the park I just showed you, which is Shawnee, which was the larger white park. And so there's a whole history there of segregation. This particular park has a pond, which was considered contaminated, so an environmental justice issue in the 1990s. A sign went up that the pond was contaminated, and Metro government said we'll be back in a year to do some more testing. 20 years later, the sign was still up. We finally had got a grant to do a process, public input process and testing to redesign this pond, and so that's a shovel-ready project. We have now construction drawings to expand the pond, put in a fishing pier, and our goal with this is to have this support the center down the road and the new boat ramp by being able to offer flat water canoeing instruction, paddling instruction, safety instruction, as well as environmental education, and just allow it to be a great amenity for fishing as well. There's also a forest play area in the park that we're proposing that has an overlook of the Ohio River. So we're just really trying to create that connectivity to the water resources in West Louisville, which really have been disinvested in over the years. So that's part of the solution here. So I talked about some of the amenities in Shawnee Park. Here's the new boat ramp that's now in. We just have finishing up the parking lot. It's connected to the Louisville Loop. We did put in a bike trail, pump track a few years ago, which Mark is familiar with. And now next year, we're planning on putting in a hiking trail, which would be the first hiking trail in West Louisville. So all these amenities that I'm talking about are designed to kind of deal with that deficit of infrastructure improvements. And so since Seth had kind of teed this up, this is one of those projects that is it's not landscape level, but it's definitely got a lot of components, more than just a tennis court. So it really requires all these elements to be constructed so that we can have the best functioning center, which again, going back to, it will be an outreach center. This is where we will store the bikes, the hiking gear, the canoes, the fishing rods, and then we'll inside have an office space to create jobs for kids that are coming through the programming, to who will represent the community and be leaders in this space in their own community. Which will really, I think, shake up our system of how we do this kind of programming in Louisville. It's really a white-dominated space, and there's been a lot of changes with a lot of groups, diverse groups coming up, kind of representing their own communities and expressing their strong interest in the outdoors. There's Outdoor Afro. There's Play Cousins in Louisville. There's a lot of different ones that are popping up. I know nationally too. So we're just trying to be part of that system and support that growth in diversification in our space. just a few scenes of the building. So inside, it's going to have a climbing wall. It's if you look through the hallway here to the river, we've got the office space and classrooms. There's an outdoor classroom for us to be able to work with the school system and other partners to engage in that kind of space. Potential garden space for community groups to partner with us on, which is something that's really popular right now. The food desert concept. Dual use space in the building for classrooms and also events. That's part of the revenue model for the facility. We do have, and that's not really shown except in the main picture, but there's a really cool, I'm gonna go back here. There's a really cool rooftop terrace. So you can kind of see it there. And it's got an overlook of the river. It's kind of cantilevered out over a hill. So we're gonna have great views of the Ohio River. That's a green roof. That'll be part of the revenue generation. We'll be able to have receptions up there. But it also requires secondary exits. So we've got a planned rappelling wall / climbing wall on the back of the building. So I think if you can, imagine all of those amenities that are created in West Louisville that then support the programming that we have. So that's the Louisville Echo program. We're currently serving 5,000 total, which includes families during public events, but specifically we're reaching 2,500 youth through targeted programming in partnership with community centers, local schools, and our goal with the center is to expand that, double that, and have a lot more partnerships with local schools, develop a volunteer base in West Louisville, partnerships with Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, all the different entities. Try to activate some of these Spark Park spaces with new partnerships. So we'd love to see a canoeing and paddling club in West Louisville that connects to what you all are doing. That would be fantastic. So just a lot of potential. I guess as far as an update right now, this facility is in the Metro Parks budget request to the mayor for this budget cycle. We have a friends group called Wilderness Louisville Inc., which is the fundraising entity. We have been reaching out to educate the local donor community. We will know in about a month whether the mayor is going to put this facility in his budget request to Metro Council. We've got letters of support from all the council members in West Louisville. We've done a recent presentation to the entire council and got great feedback from members who live outside of West Louisville. So if this is going to happen, this is the year. And appreciate David's support over the year, Mark's support over the years, and we're excited to be at this point where this actually could become reality. So stay tuned. I'll have more in about a month. So I'll love to take any questions.
I think this infrastructure development is so important, and as you said, it's years of neglect almost, even though the parks are beautiful, 2 Olmsted parks that are just incredible, but in a severely depressed neighborhood in many respects. And I just applaud the work of Metro Parks and how we as a committee can support this, and I'd like to have us at least write a letter of support saying, Mayor Fisher, go for it.
I so move. Yeah.
Sounds great. Is there any other comments or discussion or thoughts? Is there a stash of money in Frankfurt, Seth, that's just waiting to be spent?
I'll check the storage room when we're up there. I'm up there tomorrow and see what I can come up with.
I do think I understood that there's the Land and Water Conservation Fund. I think there's a new application coming out that is really geared towards larger projects, and I don't think it's been announced yet. So like the limit in the state right now of Kentucky anyway is 250,000 is the top amount for the current process, which is the first applications are due, I think, in May. But we do understand there's another one coming out that maybe is up to 20 million per project. And so that's, I think, competitive nationally. I don't know that there's a huge number of those. So we've got our eye on that to be able to fund probably, maybe the Chickasaw Pond restoration, but there is some big money out there potentially.
Jack, you had a comment?
Yeah, I did. Hey, Bennett, first of all, congratulations on this project. It looks absolutely fantastic. My question is, how engaged was the local community, the residents you hope to serve most by this project? Were they engaged in public input, master planning? How engaged were they with your design development process?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we did about the best we could do, and I think the feedback we get from the community is that we did a pretty good job, but it's obviously never perfect. You always have meetings where you run into folks who, why don't I know about this? Why didn't I hear about this? So we have had that. That's a part of the process for parks and government. But we really we've been at this for 12 years. Our main source of outreach was directly with parents involved in the programming. And we did a lot of our public input by doing it in the parks during events where we had, you know, for instance, I mean, a part of the issue is we're talking about activities that weren't present. So you would get comments like, you know, why this, you know, I need my playground fixed. So there was that kind of dynamic. So we actually organized events where we brought a climbing wall. We had to create, and David knows this, we created trails on the Ohio River to get down to the river so we could do a canoeing program because there was no access. So we literally brought the activities to the park on a temporary basis to engage kids and families in them while we garnered their input. So that we have had steering committees that have now morphed into a community council of residents that's guiding the process. So we've done it about as good as we can. I think, you know, working for Metro and with no marketing budget and, you know, so many competing interests, it's always been hard to get maybe the level of advertisement we would have hoped in the community. But, you know, it's been great to come this far.
Yeah, well, good. It looks good. Congratulations.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, David. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Bennett. And I will draft a letter and pass it around and see what people say and get it off pretty soon. Craig has been waiting patiently and he is here to give an update. Harry is getting his second COVID shot. And so we've asked Craig to talk a little bit about the upcoming congressional meeting with the Ohio River Congressional Caucus that, at least in Louisville, Representative Yarmouth is co-chair of.
That's right. Thank you, David, as well as the group. So my first joining your work group, and I'll just say, David, I'm not surprised by your leadership here, but it's a great group and a lot of great work going on. So hats off to you and the team. So thank you for that. As we're doing some finalization, Richard Harrison and myself and Harry have been working with, as David mentioned, Mr. Yarmouth and then Mr. Johnson from the state of Ohio as the co-chairs of the caucus, and also working with Capito in West Virginia. You know, the real design there is as we have all hit the ground running post-September of this year, or last year, to bring the work groups up and with Harry's leadership and get them started, get them staffed, get them organized, get them running and doing a lot of the progress. It's time for us now to, I think, expand our scope and circles of influence, you know, and reach out and engage our congressional delegation and build that delegation. So as time comes in the near term, when the work in the work groups is progressing, where we're identifying opportunities where there are either opportunities or needs, and looking to couple those with funding sources that we believe exist, or conversely that we need to invent, that we want to have a caucus that is well informed and ready to move, you know, as quickly as possible when we can present those needs and issues to the caucus. So that's our design. We have been working through both Yarmouth and Johnson's office, and I'm less familiar with Yarmouth, but Bill Johnson's a good friend, and he has indulged us to a great extent, as they both have. We've drafted a letter to go out under their signatures to all of the members, inviting them to a yet to be determined date here, hopefully in early or as early in April as possible, to have them join a call. And we wish we could do it in person, but perhaps next time. And really then start to inform them of what's happened post-September and all of our work groups. That's huge success and progress that's been made. Let them ask questions. And then more importantly, we want to engage them to join the caucus. You know, kind of the springtime on the Hill is when all of these caucuses get formed and members are picking and choosing, if you will, where they want to spend their precious time and as well as their staff time. So now is the time for us to, you know, be on the Hill, even as remotely as we'll have to do it. And this will go hand in hand with the Army Corps is also doing a similar. They are not out lobbying per se, as you know, they're prohibited from doing that. But the Army Corps makes their rounds on the Hill to talk about all of their congressional priorities and do their briefings, and they get oh so close to lobbying. But they're also taking with them on information that we have provided and reviewed for them about all of the work and activities that Orba has been engaged in. So we think we're going to get 2 bites at the apple. One thing that Harry has asked all of the co-chairs to work on, and you've likely heard it from David, is, you know, what's our elevator pitch, if you will, quote unquote, as we have the work groups assemble and do this all member call for the caucus. How do we wrap up the work that you're doing in a high level in about 5 minutes? And if you have a sample priority or a project that you're working on, what would be a good placeholder or leave behind, if you will, mentally for them to just lock in all of our work groups, what is going on tangibly, so that they can be thinking about where there might be funding, or if we have a funding source or a project, and how we think that gets attached to some ongoing legislation, where that might be. So that is the ask that we have made of the work group co-chairs, and for you all to be thinking about as we get this meeting planned and scheduled. Right now, we have drafted drafted the letter to the members. We've sent it to both committee chairs or both caucus chairs, and they are reviewing that letter. That letter hopefully will go out very soon, and then we can, we've asked them for some guidance on a date, and they've given us some feedback, and we're just allowing them to select that date when they think it would be most advantageous to get cast the widest net, both of members and their aides. I find it a little bit interesting that we're actually getting better access to the congressional delegation through COVID. You would think that, you know, with all of the restrictions, personally not being able to get into their offices would be a real hardship, and to some degree it still is. But they're finding that, I believe they're finding themselves with a little more time to pay attention to some constituent needs, and we're finding better opportunities to get them to attend meetings like this that are virtual. And so I think our hopes are high that we'll start being able to build the caucus and expand the outreach, and then start spreading our message. And largely that's all going to be because of the work that you're doing currently. So I thank you for that. And David, I'm happy to answer any questions that your members might have.
Hey, David.
Yeah, go ahead, Brewster.
Yeah, real quickly, Craig, thanks for what you're doing with this. You know, I'd be happy to follow up if you could send me a copy of the letter that actually gets sent out by the co-chairs. I'll follow up with Brown and Portman and Shabbat and Wenstrup.
Yeah, absolutely. I can even get you I'll get you a draft of what we sent them. I can't, we've worked with them on a couple of drafts, so it may get changed just a little bit, but I'll send it just for your own review and edification. And then when the final one goes out, we'll definitely do that.
Thank you very much. Great.
Yeah, I have made that suggestion, Brewster, that Orba make sure they go through the local people as well. You know, it's great to get a note from a congressional co-chair, but getting a constituent is just as good. Well, one thing I've learned today is we have 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes, which I guess the schedule is still getting worked out, but that's okay. One thing, you know, and we're open for the content. And so just to let everybody know, you know, we did write a overview for Risa's Journal of the River Management Society that I think might come out next issue or the issue after that. And we've talked a little bit about celebrating the successes, not necessarily going after our big projects, but sort of celebrating the successes, and drafted Brewster as our bicycle riding enthusiast, and then having Risa talk, well, maybe Risa and David, because our big project really, there's so many different projects we're working on, but one of them that's very tangential is this River Management Society's National Rivers Project, and the Ohio River Digital Guide, and the Tennessee Guide, and how one can sort of feature both of those, because that might get across recreation in the basin, because that's the challenge. How to get across recreation in the basin. You know, you're looking at the brand new River National Park down to paddling on Indian Creek. So we thought maybe that would be a piece. I wanted to throw it open to have any other thoughts.
David, it's Craig. I think if you're working on a 10-minute presentation there, I think that's fine. We're a little bit flexible, so I wouldn't say that you got to go tear half the pages off the back of your presentation and do 5 minutes. So I think we're a little bit flexible there.
Sounds great. Any other questions? We have a couple minutes left, and we have a couple more topics left, even though Russ Clark just joined us. So Russ, you missed Bennett's description of the Shawnee Outdoor Learning Center, which you probably know just as much about. And his big news is it's in the proposed budget from the mayor. And so we're dreaming up of how to support Mayor Fisher and going forward with that. The one topic that we have left that I added is Rivertown Review. And we're having a meeting tomorrow, and I'd like to have Jack and Russ talk a little bit about our meeting and our 3 towns that we're working with, and our pitch to get some people to help us.
Yeah, thank you, David. So we're entering into round 2 of our Rivertown Review process on the Ohio River Recreation Trail. And we're working with 3 communities in round 2. One is Augusta, Kentucky. The second is a consortium from Dearborn County, Indiana, including Lawrenceburg, Aurora, and the Dearborn County Tourism Group. And then the third group is from Switzerland County, Indiana, which is primarily Vivi, but there's some other small towns. So tomorrow is our kickoff meeting. We've invited all 3 community members to a Zoom meeting where we're going to give them a general high-level overview of the Rivertown Review process, listen to them a little bit about what their expectations, and then kind of get the thing rolling in April and May. So my pitch, my invitation, there's already a couple of you have already volunteered to help with some of these through doing a desktop review. We need help with that on all 3 communities. And then probably late April, May, we'll do some on the ground visitor assessment activity at each town. And that's always helpful to have another fresh set of eyes with that. So if anyone is interested, please reach out to me, reach out to David Wicks or Brewster Rhodes. We're each kind of leading up one of the communities ourselves. Also, Jody Robinson is going to help us with Augusta, Kentucky. So it's a fun project. It's well received by the communities. And if you have an interest in helping us out, let me know. Thank you.
And this is a sort of a Tennessee River Line does a similar piece, probably a bit more in depth, maybe much more in depth, because they have 8 full-time employees, I think, or 8 full-time students working on it. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up today is one of our objectives is to figure out a sustainable way for reaching out to mayors and river towns on all the streams in the basin. And between the Tennessee River Line and the Rivertown Review process, we might be able to come up with a, not one size fits all, but what can we recommend? What resources do we really need to do these sustainably down the road? And so that's our question. So anybody involved with that, I'd encourage you to think about that. We've sort of come to the end of our 5 o'clock. I want to respect everybody's time. Just to let everybody know, next week we have Eric, who is or next month, Eric is with the River Trails Conservancy, and they have a huge plan in the Ohio River Basin, based around Pittsburgh, but hundreds of miles of trails. And they're interested in working. They're down here in Louisville, well, not Louisville, southern Indiana, going up towards Bloomington, and just a fascinating process. And they have a bill that's being considered, or a piece of legislation that's going into the infrastructure piece that he would like to get support on and see how that can fit in. We also want to sort of reach out to Outdoor Alliance and American Rivers. And Brewster, you're sending me that contact information. Is there any other committee work? We sort of are doing short shrift to the committee work here and doing more in depth. Any other discussions around that? The only piece I have then is another committee meeting. If anybody wants to be on more Zoom meetings, we have our new Army Corps contingent for the old lock houses, the 52 lock houses on the Ohio River and all of the ones on the Kentucky River and other rivers. Well, now we have 3 full-time Corps people working on it. So it's really quite surprising. It's our first meeting coming up on March 31st. Trish is involved in that. Thank you, Trish. And that's at 9 a.m. If anybody else wants to join us, we did hear a wonderful presentation at 12 o'clock today by the University of Cincinnati, and they are going into the architectural diagrams and descriptions of 2 vacant lock houses, one near Parkersburg, and I'll get the other ones. I forget where it is, but anyway, they're developing that whole background on those 2 lock houses, and they think they have a funding deal for Parkersburg, which is quite interesting. Anything else for the good of the order? Yes, Risa, go ahead.
Just wanted to report that the digital guide group met. Oh, it seems like a long time ago, but I think it was just a few days ago. And we kind of settled on how we're going to approach both the description of the guide. It's kind of a 2-layer guide instead of just one place, one bucket where everything feeds into that bucket. Where we've sort of settled is that our kind of description of the guide is going to be the National River Recreation Database, which is interfaces on the web with the National Rivers Project at the kind of this level, like 10,000, 25, 30, 15,000 level, and includes 2 specific projects whose detail is also being pursued at the 5-foot level. The Ohio River Recreation Database, the Ohio River Recreation Trail, seeking to fill out the main stem and tributaries for David to tell us how many tributaries that is, and then to also fill in the Tennessee Riverline project, because between those 2 they encompass 2 major main stems, if you will. And I'm not sure about the data, like the schema, the columns and rows that David would use to fill all those out, because there are many. But the Tennessee Riverline one will align exactly with the National River Recreation Database. So everything that fills in for Tennessee will automatically fit into the larger one. So it's not like exactly like super cut and dry, but it works for all the people who are on the committee. It'll serve all the projects represented by those who are on the committee. So anyway, more to come, but we've settled on that. So I think the committee's happy.
Just to let you know, David reported basically the same thing earlier. And he also said that there's going to be a concept paper written after the next meeting. At least he's going to try to develop a concept paper with budgetary implications after the next meeting. Is that accurate, David?
We'll have some kind of report for you. You keep putting words in my mouth, I think. David.
Oh, okay, I don't mean to do that.
Well, it's a lot easier now. If David identifies what he wants for his project, and Brad does for his part. We still might not know exactly, and I do for our project. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier, so we can come closer, I think.
Sounds great. Any last comments here? Russ, any other comments? You haven't said much.
Yes, the only thing that I would add is just for a heads up that the Green River will be announced as a new recipient of the National Water Trails designation on June 5th by the Department of Interior. A group has worked very diligently around Mammoth Cave from a project that I did for Cave Country Trails, and have submitted to all the requirements to meet the criteria, and will be awarded with that designation in June.
Is there a role that our little committee could help celebrate, or what would you recommend? Do we send a nice letter saying congratulations?
Yeah, I'll let you know as things come together for that. The planning group is just starting to meet on how that event's going to be laid out.
Here's just a question. Orsenco has started their Ohio River discussion series, and June, I don't think, is set up yet. And I don't know if they would be interested in doing an Ohio River discussion series around the Green River National Trail on National Trails Day or sometime around that.
Okay.
Heather Mayfield's the person. I don't mind talking with her.
Okay.
That's of interest. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you very much, Bennett. Thank you very much, Seth, for your conversation and discussion. And everybody else, we'll see everybody else next month. Bye.
See you, David.